The morning alarm pierced through the silence of the luxurious penthouse apartment at exactly 5:30 a.m., but Lee Ji-woo was already awake. She had been lying in bed for the past 20 minutes, watching the Seoul skyline slowly emerge from the pre-dawn darkness, steeling herself for another day of pretending that the man sleeping peacefully beside her was nothing more than her demanding boss. Carefully, so as not to disturb him, Ji-woo slipped out of the king-size bed and padded silently across the marble floor to the walk-in closet. Inside, her wardrobe was divided into two distinct sections. On the left, designer dresses and luxury, items that befitted the secret wife of one of Seoul's most powerful CEOs, and on the right, conservative blouses and modest skirts that belonged to his unremarkable personal assistant. Today, like every weekday for the past 2 years, she would choose from the right side. As she buttoned up a plain white blouse and smoothed down her pencil skirt, Ji-woo caught her reflection in the full-length mirror. At 28, she had learned to make herself invisible when necessary. Her long black hair pulled back in a severe bun, minimal makeup, glasses that she didn't actually need but wore to complete the image of the efficient, forgettable assistant. The transformation was so complete that sometimes she almost forgot who she really was beneath the carefully constructed facade. Behind her, she heard the rustle of bedsheets and turned to see her husband stirring. Even in sleep, Kang Do-hyun looked like he belonged on the cover of a business magazine. Sharp jawline, perfectly styled dark hair that somehow never seemed messy no matter how much he tossed and turned, and an air of authority that followed him even into his dreams. At 32, Do-hyun was the youngest CEO in the history of Kang Industries, a multinational corporation that his grandfather had built from nothing, and his father had expanded into an empire. The pressure to maintain the company's reputation and continue its growth was something he carried on his shoulders every single day, and Ji-woo had watched that weight slowly change him over the 2 years of their secret marriage. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice still husky with sleep as his eyes found hers in the mirror. "Good morning, Mr. Kang," she replied automatically, then caught herself. "I mean, good morning, Do-hyun." Even in the privacy of their own bedroom, the habit of formality was hard to break. During business hours, she was nothing more than his assistant, efficient, professional, and completely invisible. The irony wasn't lost on her that she knew every detail of his business empire, every preference for his coffee, every appointment in his schedule. But in the office, she had to pretend she didn't also know that he talked in his sleep when he was stressed, or that he had a small scar on his shoulder from a childhood accident, or that he still kept the pressed flower from their secret wedding bouquet in his wallet. Do-hyun sat up, running a hand through his hair as he watched her prepare for another day of their elaborate charade. "Ji-woo," he said softly, and something in his tone made her pause in fixing her hair. "What is it? How much longer can we keep doing this?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither was quite ready to cross. It was a conversation they had been dancing around for months. When they had first agreed to keep their marriage secret, it had seemed like a temporary necessity. Do-hyun's position as CEO was still new and precarious, with board members and shareholders watching his every move. A sudden marriage, especially to someone they would see as beneath his social status, could have been used against him by those who wanted to see him fail. Ji-woo had understood the logic, even if it hurt. She had grown up in a working-class family in Busan, the daughter of a factory worker and a seamstress. She had worked 3 jobs to put herself through university, studying business administration with dreams of one day running her own company. When she had applied for the assistant position at Kang Industries, it was supposed to be a stepping stone, a way to learn from the inside how successful businesses operated. She had never expected to fall in love with her boss, and she had certainly never expected him to fall in love with her. "The board meeting is next month," Ji-woo said carefully, avoiding his question. "The merger with the Japanese firm. After that settles, there will always be another crisis," Do-hyun said, standing and moving to stand behind her. In the ETA mirror, they looked like any other married couple getting ready for work. except for the careful distance they maintained even in their most intimate moments. Another board meeting, another merger, another reason why the timing isn't right. Jiwoo felt her heart clench. She knew he was right, but the alternative, revealing their marriage and facing the inevitable scandal, seemed impossible to navigate. She had seen what happened to other women who had dared to reach above their station in Seoul's rigid social hierarchy. The media would tear her apart, questioning her motives, her background, her worthiness to stand beside someone like Do-hyun. "Your mother called yesterday," she said, changing the subject as she always did when this conversation became too heavy. "She wants to set up another meeting with the daughter of that textile company owner." Do-hyun's jaw tightened. His mother, the formidable Madame Kang, had been orchestrating a parade of suitable marriage candidates ever since Do-hyun had taken over as CEO. Women from appropriate families, with the right education and connections, who could enhance the company's social standing rather than potentially damage it. "I'll handle my mother," he said firmly. "Like you handled her last week? And the week before that?" There was more edge to Jiwoo's voice than she intended. The strain of their situation was showing, wearing away at the careful politeness they maintained even in private. Do-hyun was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was soft. "I know this is hard. I know I'm asking too much of you." Jiwoo turned to face him fully, seeing the genuine pain in his dark eyes. This was hurting him too, she realized. The constant pretense, the inability to acknowledge their relationship publicly, the way he had to watch other men in the office, dismiss her or speak condescendingly to her without being able to defend her as her husband. "I chose this," she said quietly. "I chose you, knowing what it would mean." "But for how long?" Do-hyun reached out as if to touch her face, then let his hand fall. Even their physical affection had become cautious, controlled by the fear that someone might see, someone might suspect. Before Jiwoo could answer, her phone buzzed with an alert. 6:45 a.m., time for her to leave for the office. As Do-hyun's assistant, she was expected to arrive 30 minutes before him to prepare for his day, review his schedule, and ensure everything was perfectly organized for his arrival. "I have to go," she said, grabbing her sensible black handbag, and the tablet that contained Do-hyun's life organized down to 15-minute increments. "Jiwoo." Do-hyun's voice stopped her at the bedroom door. "Tonight, when we get home, can we just be us? No talk about the office, no discussion of schedules or meetings. Just us." She nodded, not trusting her voice to remain steady, and left their shared home to begin another day of pretending he was nothing more than her employer. The commute to Kang Industries' gleaming headquarters in Gangnam took 45 minutes by subway. Jiwoo had insisted on taking public transportation rather than riding with Do-hyun in his chauffeured car, another small sacrifice in service of their secret. During the ride, she transformed completely into her professional persona, reviewing notes on her tablet and mentally preparing for the day ahead. Kang Industries occupied 30 floors of one of Seoul's most prestigious office towers. The executive level, where Do-hyun's office was located, was a study in understated luxury. Marble floors, tasteful artwork, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered breathtaking views of the Han River. Jiwoo's desk sat directly outside Do-hyun's corner office, positioned so she could screen all visitors and manage his appointments with military precision. She had been at her desk for exactly 23 minutes, reviewing the morning's correspondence and confirming lunch reservations, when the elevator doors opened and Do-hyun stepped out. Immediately, Jiwoo felt her posture straighten, her expression becoming professionally neutral. "Good morning, Mr. Kang," she said, standing and bowing slightly as he approached. "Good morning, Ms. Lee," he replied formally, accepting the folder she handed him containing his daily schedule and priority items requiring his attention. To anyone watching, it was a perfectly normal interaction between a CEO and his assistant. No one could have guessed that just 2 hours earlier, they had been lying in the same bed, discussing the future of their secret marriage. "Your 9 a.m. appointment with the marketing team has been confirmed in conference room A," Jiwoo reported efficiently. The quarterly reports you requested are on your desk, and I've scheduled a call with the Osaka office for 2 p.m. to discuss the merger timeline. Do-hyun nodded, his businessman's mask firmly in place. Thank you. Please hold my calls until after the marketing meeting. Of course, sir. He disappeared into his office, closing the door behind him, and Ji-woo settled back into her chair to begin another day of careful performance. She answered phones with professional courtesy, scheduled appointments with mechanical efficiency, and fielded questions from other employees who barely seemed to see her as a real person. Ms. Lee, a voice called from across the executive floor. Ji-woo looked up to see Park Sung-min, the company's head of strategic development, approaching her desk. At 45, Park was a veteran of corporate politics, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to catalogue every detail around him. Yes, Mr. Park, Ji-woo replied politely. I need to see Mr. Kang immediately. It's regarding the Tokyo negotiations. Ji-woo glanced at her computer screen. Mr. Kang is currently in a meeting with the marketing team. I can schedule you for 10:30, or if it's urgent, I can send him a message. Park's expression tightened with impatience. Young lady, when I say something is urgent, I don't need some secretary telling me about schedules. Just interrupt his meeting. The dismissive tone and the word secretary stung more than Ji-woo cared to admit. She had a master's degree in business administration and could probably run circles around Park in terms of understanding the company's operations. But to him, she was just another pretty face hired to answer phones and look decorative. I understand. Your urgency, Mr. Park, Ji-woo said carefully, maintaining her professional demeanor. However, Mr. Kang specifically requested not to be disturbed during this meeting. I'd be happy to convey a message or schedule you for the next available slot. Park leaned over her desk, his voice dropping to a condescending whisper. Listen, sweetheart, I've been with this company since before you were out of high school. I don't need some little assistant telling me how to do my job. Now either you interrupt that meeting, or I'll go in there myself and explain to Mr. Kang why his secretary doesn't understand priorities. Ji-woo felt her cheeks burn with humiliation and anger, but she kept her expression neutral. This was the reality of her position. Men like Park could speak to her however they pleased, secure in the knowledge that she had no power to defend herself. What made it worse was knowing that her husband was just 20 feet away, completely unaware that one of his senior executives was treating his wife like she was beneath contempt. I'll send Mr. Kang a message immediately, she said quietly, her fingers moving over her keyboard to compose a brief, professional note about Park's urgent request. Within minutes, Do-hyun's office door opened, and he stepped out with his usual, composed expression. Mr. Park, he said with professional courtesy, Ms. Lee mentioned you have urgent business regarding Tokyo. Yes, we need to discuss the revised terms they're proposing, Park said, completely ignoring Ji-woo now that he had Do-hyun's attention. It's quite complex, probably too complicated for... He glanced dismissively at Ji-woo, others to understand. Do-hyun's eyes flickered almost imperceptibly toward Ji-woo, and she caught something there. A flash of anger that was quickly suppressed. Of course, he said smoothly. Please, come into my office. As the two men disappeared behind the closed door, Ji-woo sat at her desk, feeling the familiar ache of invisibility. In their home, she was Do-hyun's equal, his partner, someone whose opinions he valued and whose intelligence he respected. But here, she was just another employee, someone who could be spoken to dismissively without consequence. The day continued with its usual rhythm of meetings, phone calls, and administrative tasks. Ji-woo managed Do-hyun's schedule with practiced efficiency, coordinating with various departments and external partners while maintaining her facade of professional invisibility. She watched through the glass walls of conference rooms as Do-hyun led meetings with confidence and authority, making decisions that would affect thousands of employees and millions in revenue. During lunch, while Do-hyun met with potential investors at an upscale restaurant, Ji-woo ate a simple sandwich at her desk and caught up on industry news. She had developed a habit of staying informed about all aspects of the business, not just the administrative details of her job. It was partly professional curiosity and partly a way to feel more connected to the work that dominated their lives. Still eating at your desk, I see. Ji-woo looked up to find Choi Min-jung, one of the few people in the office who treated her with genuine friendliness. Min-jung worked in the legal department and was one of the rising stars in the company, brilliant, ambitious, and refreshingly down-to-earth despite her privileged background. "Busy day," Ji-woo replied with a smile that felt more genuine than most of her professional expressions. "There's a rumor going around," Min-jung said, lowering her voice and glancing around to make sure they weren't overheard. "About Mr. Kang." Ji-woo's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression neutral. "Oh?" "Apparently, his mother has been pushing really hard for him to get married. My friend in the PR department says they're already drafting press releases about a potential engagement announcement." The sandwich in Ji-woo's mouth suddenly tasted like cardboard. "Really?" she managed to say. "Can you imagine the pressure?" Min-jung continued, oblivious to Ji-woo's internal turmoil. "Being forced to marry someone for business reasons rather than love. Though I suppose when you're that wealthy and powerful, love is probably a luxury you can't afford." Ji-woo forced herself to nod and make appropriate responses, but her mind was spinning. Was Do-hyun's mother really that close to forcing his hand? Had the pressure increased without him telling her? The afternoon passed in a blur of routine tasks punctuated by growing anxiety. When Do-hyun returned from his lunch meeting, Ji-woo searched his face for any sign of stress or concern, but his expression remained professionally neutral. They exchanged only the necessary words about his afternoon schedule and upcoming appointments. It wasn't until nearly 7 p.m., when the office had emptied of all but the most dedicated workaholics, that Do-hyun finally emerged from his office, looking exhausted. "Ms. Lee," he said formally, even though they were alone on the executive floor, "please compile the quarterly reports into a summary format and have them ready for tomorrow's board meeting." "Of course, Mr. Kang," Ji-woo replied, though they both knew this was unnecessary busy work, an excuse for her to stay late so they could leave the building together without raising suspicions. An hour later, they found themselves alone in the elevator descending toward the parking garage. The moment the doors closed, the careful distance between them seemed to collapse. "Long day," Do-hyun said quietly, and Ji-woo could hear the exhaustion in his voice that he had been hiding all day. "Park was particularly charming this morning," Ji-woo said with dry sarcasm. Do-hyun's jaw tightened. "What did he say to you?" "Nothing I haven't heard before. I'm just another secretary to him, remember?" "You're not just anything," Do-hyun said fiercely, and for a moment, his careful control slipped. "Ji-woo, you have an MBA from Seoul National University. You could run circles around half the executives in that building. The fact that they can't see that says everything about them and nothing about you." The elevator reached the parking garage, but neither of them moved when the doors opened. They stood in the small space, finally allowing themselves to look at each other, without the careful professional masks they wore all day. "Min-jung mentioned something today," Ji-woo said carefully. "About your mother and marriage arrangements." Do-hyun's expression darkened. "What exactly did she say?" "That there might be an engagement announcement soon. Is it true?" Do-hyun was quiet for a long moment, and his silence was answer enough. Ji-woo felt something cold settle in her stomach. "She's been increasing the pressure," he finally admitted. "The board has been making comments about stability and family values. They think a proper marriage would enhance my credibility as CEO." "A proper marriage," Ji-woo repeated, and she couldn't keep the bitterness out of her voice. "As opposed to our improper one." "That's not what I meant, isn't it?" Ji-woo stepped out of the elevator, needing space to breathe. "Do-hyun, we've been married for 2 years, and sometimes I feel like you're more ashamed of me than proud." "That's not true," Do-hyun said, following her toward his car. "Ji-woo, you know that's not true." "Do I? When was the last time you defended me in front of your colleagues? When was the last time you introduced me as anything more than your assistant? When was the last time you acted like I was someone important to you when anyone else was around?" They had reached his car, a sleek black sedan that screamed executive privilege. Do-hyun stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "You are the most important person in my life," he said quietly. "Everything I do, every decision I make, I think about how it will affect us. But Ji-woo, you knew when we got married that it would have to be secret, at least for a while. 2 years, Do-hyun. It's been 2 years of just a little longer, and when the timing is right, how much longer are you asking me to wait?" The question hung between them in the fluorescent-lit parking garage, surrounded by the concrete and steel that seemed to symbolize all the barriers between them and a normal life. "I don't know," Do-hyun said finally, and his honesty was somehow worse than a lie would have been. They drove home in silence, both lost in their own thoughts. The penthouse that had once felt like a sanctuary now seemed like another kind of prison, a beautiful space where they could be themselves only when hidden from the world. That night, Ji-woo lay awake long after Do-hyun had fallen asleep beside her. She stared at the ceiling and wondered how much longer she could continue living 2 separate lives. During the day, she was the invisible assistant, treated with condescension by men who saw her as decoration rather than a person with thoughts and feelings and dreams of her own. At night, she was the secret wife, loved but hidden, cherished but never acknowledged. She thought about the woman she had been before she met Do-hyun, ambitious, independent, full of plans for her own future. Somewhere along the way, she had become so focused on supporting his dreams that she had forgotten her own. The next morning brought a crisis that would test the limits of their carefully constructed deception. Ji-woo arrived at the office to find the executive floor buzzing with unusual activity. Senior managers were huddled in urgent conversations, and there was a tension in the air that she recognized as the precursor to corporate disaster. "Ms. Lee," Do-hyun's voice was sharp with stress as he emerged from his office. "I need you to clear my schedule for the rest of the morning. We have a situation." "What kind of situation?" Ji-woo asked, immediately switching into crisis management mode. "The Tokyo deal. Someone leaked details of our negotiating position to the press. The Japanese partners are threatening to pull out entirely." Ji-woo felt her stomach drop. The Tokyo merger was crucial to Kang Industries' expansion plans for the next 5 years. If it fell through, it would be a massive blow to the company's stock price and Do-hyun's credibility as CEO. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. "Get Chairman Nakamura on the phone immediately. Set up a video conference for within the hour, and see if you can track down where the leak came from, carefully. We need to know if this was corporate espionage or just careless gossip." As Do-hyun disappeared back into his office to begin damage control, Ji-woo threw herself into crisis mode. She coordinated with the IT department to set up the video conference, contacted the Japanese offices despite the time difference, and began the delicate process of investigating the leak without alerting anyone to what she was doing. It was during this investigation that she discovered something that made her blood run cold. The leaked information hadn't come from the negotiating team or the legal department. It had come from someone with access to Do-hyun's personal files, someone who knew details that were only discussed in his private office. Someone like his personal assistant would know. The realization hit her like a physical blow. In the eyes of anyone investigating this leak, she would be the obvious suspect. She had access to all of Do-hyun's confidential information. She was present during sensitive phone calls, and she had no obvious loyalty to the company beyond her paycheck. To the board of directors and the corporate investigators, she would look like the perfect candidate for corporate espionage. "Ms. Lee," Park Sung-min's voice made her look up from her computer screen. His expression was unreadable, but there was something in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. "Yes, Mr. Park?" "Mr. Kang would like to see you in his office. Immediately." Ji-woo's mouth went dry. She saved her work, straightened her skirt, and walked toward Do-hyun's office with a growing sense of dread. Through the glass walls, she could see that he wasn't alone. Several senior executives were seated around his conference table, their faces grim. When she entered the office, the conversation stopped abruptly. Do-hyun looked up at her and, for just a moment, she saw something in his eyes that might have been apology or warning. "Ms. Lee," he said formally, "please have a seat." Ji-woo remained standing. "Is there something you need, Mr. Kang?" "We need to discuss the leaked information regarding the Tokyo negotiations," Park said, taking control of the conversation. "As Mr. Kang's assistant, you had access to all the relevant documents." "Yes," Ji-woo said carefully, "along with several other people." "But you were the only one who was present during all the key conversations," another executive pointed out. "The only one who had both digital and verbal access to every piece of information that was leaked." Ji-woo felt the walls closing in, around her. She looked at Do-hyun, hoping for some sign of support, but his expression remained professionally neutral. She realized with growing horror that he couldn't defend her, not without raising suspicions about their relationship. "I understand your concern," Ji-woo said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "But I can assure you that I have never disclosed confidential company information to anyone." "Nevertheless," Park continued, "given the sensitive nature of this situation, we think it would be best if you took a temporary leave of absence while we conduct a thorough investigation." The words hit Ji-woo like a slap. A temporary leave of absence was corporate speak for "you're suspended pending termination." They were essentially accusing her of corporate espionage and removing her from her position. "I see," she said quietly, her gaze fixed on Do-hyun's face. This was the moment when he could choose to stand by her, to defend her, to reveal the truth about their relationship, and trust that their love was worth fighting for. Do-hyun met her eyes for just a moment, and she saw the conflict. There, the war between his love for her and his duty to the company, between his heart and his responsibilities as CEO. "I think that's wise," he said finally, and Ji-woo felt something inside her chest shatter. "Very well," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I'll clear out my desk immediately." She turned to leave, but Do-hyun's voice stopped her. "Ms. Lee." She paused, but didn't turn around. "This investigation will be conducted fairly and thoroughly. If you're innocent, as I believe you are, you'll be reinstated with full apologies." Ji-woo almost smiled at the irony. He believed she was innocent because he knew she was innocent, because he was her husband and knew she would never betray him. But he couldn't say that, couldn't defend her publicly, couldn't risk his position even to protect the woman he claimed to love. "Thank you for your confidence, Mr. Kang," she said, and walked out of his office for what she suspected might be the last time. Clearing out her desk took less than 20 minutes. 2 years of her professional life fit into a single cardboard box. Personal photos, a coffee mug, some books, and the small succulent plant she had kept on her windowsill. As she packed, other employees watched, with a mixture of curiosity and sympathy, but no one dared to ask what was happening. Min-jung appeared at her desk just as Ji-woo was finishing. "What's going on?" she asked quietly. "There are rumors. I'm taking some time off," Ji-woo said, forcing a smile. "Family matters." Min-jung looked skeptical but didn't press. "Well, if you need anything, you have my number." As Ji-woo walked toward the elevator carrying her box of belongings, she felt eyes following her from across the executive floor. Through the glass walls of his office, she could see Do-hyun still in his meeting, still discussing the crisis that had somehow become her crisis as well. She paused at the elevator, waiting for the doors to open, and found herself hoping desperately that he would come after her, that he would choose this moment to finally put their marriage above his career, that he would defend her publicly and damn the consequences. The elevator arrived, and Ji-woo stepped inside. As the doors began to close, she caught one last glimpse of the executive floor, the marble floors, the tasteful artwork, the world where she had spent 2 years being invisible. Do-hyun never came after her. That afternoon, Ji-woo sat in their penthouse apartment, staring out at the Seoul skyline and trying to process what had happened. In the space of a few hours, she had lost her job, her professional reputation, and possibly her marriage. The man she loved had chosen his position over defending her, and now she was left to face the consequences alone. When Do-hyun came home that evening, he found her sitting in the dark living room, still wearing the same clothes she had worn to the office that morning. "Ji-woo," he said softly, approaching her carefully as if she might bolt. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to defend you, but I couldn't without revealing our marriage," she finished. "I know." "The investigation will clear you," Do-hyun said, sitting down across from her. "I'll make sure of it, and then you can come back, and we can pretend this never happened." "Can we?" Ji-woo asked, looking at him directly for the first time since he had entered the apartment. "Can we really just pretend this never happened?" Do-hyun was quiet for a moment. "What do you mean?" "I mean that today I realized something important. I realized that when it really mattered, when I needed you to choose between me and your career, you chose your career, and I can't pretend that doesn't matter." "That's not fair," Do-hyun said, his voice rising slightly. "You knew the situation when we got married. You knew there would be times when what? When you would throw me to the wolves to protect yourself?" Ji-woo stood up, pacing to the window. "Do-hyun, they accuse me of corporate espionage. They essentially called me a criminal, and you sat there and said nothing. I said I believed you were innocent. After they had already decided to suspend me, after it was too late for your support to matter." Ji-woo turned to face him, tears finally spilling over. "Do you have any idea what it felt like to stand there, accused of betraying the company I've devoted 2 years of my life to, while my own husband watched silently?" Do-hyun ran his hands through his hair, looking more defeated than she had ever seen him. "What did you want me to do? Reveal our marriage and destroy both our careers? Confirm their suspicions that you're sleeping with the boss for information? I wanted you to trust that our love was strong enough to survive whatever consequences came from the truth!" Ji-woo shouted, all her carefully controlled emotions finally exploding. "I wanted you to believe that I was worth fighting for!" They stood on opposite sides of the living room, two people who shared a bed and a life, but who suddenly seemed like strangers. The silence stretched between them, filled with all the words they had been too afraid to say for 2 years. "I do love you," Do-hyun said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know you do," Ji-woo replied, wiping away her tears. "But I don't think you love me more than you love your position, your reputation, your precious company. And I can't live like that anymore." "What are you saying?" Ji-woo took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would change everything between them. "I'm saying that I can't be your secret wife anymore. I can't keep living half a life, being invisible during the day and hidden at night. I deserve better than that. We both do. Ji-woo, please, don't make any decisions while you're upset. The investigation will be over soon, and then what? I go back to being your assistant. I go back to letting men like Park treat me like I'm worthless while you watch silently. I go back to pretending I don't know you when other people are around." Do-hyun moved toward her, reaching out as if to touch her face, but she stepped back. "I need some time," she said quietly. "I need to think about what I want my life to look like. Because this isn't living." "Where will you go?" "I have some money saved. I'll find a small apartment. Maybe go back to Busan for a while to visit my parents. I haven't seen them in months, because I was so afraid they might accidentally reveal something about our marriage." The irony of that statement hung between them. She had hidden their marriage so completely that even her own parents barely knew their son-in-law. "How long?" Do-hyun asked. "I don't know," Ji-woo said honestly. "Maybe forever." That night, Ji-woo packed a suitcase with clothes from both sides of her closet, the conservative work outfits and the luxury items that had been gifts from Do-hyun. As she folded each piece of clothing, she thought about the life she was leaving behind and the uncertain future ahead of her. Do-hyun sat on their bed, watching her pack with an expression of helpless misery. "I never meant for it to happen like this," he said as she zipped up her suitcase. "I know," Ji-woo replied, "but intent doesn't change impact, does it?" She paused at the bedroom door, looking back at the room they had shared for 2 years. Despite everything, there had been genuine happiness here. Quiet mornings, intimate, conversations, moments when the outside world had faded away and it had been just the two of them. "I love you," she said, needing him to know that her leaving wasn't about a lack of love. "I love you too," Do-hyun replied, and the pain in his voice was evident. "Then maybe someday you'll love me enough to fight for me." 3 weeks later, Ji-woo was living in a small apartment in Busan, working part-time at a local marketing firm while she figured out her next steps. The corporate investigation had concluded exactly as Do-hyun had predicted. She was cleared of all suspicion when they discovered that the leak had actually come from a hacker who had infiltrated the company's email system. She received the official letter of apology and reinstatement offer by email, along with a personal message from Do-hyun asking her to come home. But home didn't feel like home anymore when it required her to be someone she wasn't. Instead, Ji-woo threw herself into rebuilding her life on her own terms. She started freelance consulting for small businesses, using the skills and knowledge she had gained during her years at Kang Industries. For the first time in years, she was working under her own name, making her own decisions, and being recognized for her own talents, rather than serving as someone else's shadow. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. 1 month after leaving Seoul, Ji-woo was working late in her small apartment when her phone rang. Do-hyun's name appeared on the screen, and her heart jumped despite herself. They had exchanged a few text messages since she left, but this was the first time he had actually called. "Hello," she answered, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Ji-woo?" His voice sounded tired, strained. "How are you?" "I'm well. Busy with work. How are things at the company?" "The Tokyo deal went through. The merger will be completed next month." "That's good news." She meant it genuinely. Despite everything, she knew how important that deal was to the company's future. "Ji-woo, I need to tell you something." Do-hyun paused, and she could hear him taking a deep breath. "I told my mother about us, about our marriage." Ji-woo nearly dropped the phone. "You what?" "I told her everything. About our marriage, about why I've been refusing all her matchmaking attempts, about how I've been lying to the family for 2 years. Ji-woo sank into her chair, stunned. "What did she say?" "She was furious doesn't begin to cover it. She accused me of throwing away the family's reputation, of being selfish and irresponsible. She threatened to have me removed as CEO. Do-hyun. But then I told her about you. Really told her about you. Your education, your intelligence, how you've been essentially helping run the company from behind the scenes. I told her that you were the best thing that had ever happened to me, and that I had been a coward for hiding our marriage." Ji-woo felt tears welling up in her eyes. "What happened then?" "She demanded to meet you, properly this time, as my wife, not as some employee she could dismiss." Do-hyun's voice grew stronger. "Ji-woo, I know I handled everything wrong. I know I hurt you and let you down when you needed me most. But I'm ready to fight for us now, if you'll let me. The board can accept it or find a new CEO. I've spent 2 years trying to be the perfect executive, the perfect son, the perfect leader. But I can't be perfect at anything if I don't have you in my life." Ji-woo closed her eyes, feeling the walls she had built around her heart beginning to crack. "Do-hyun, it's not that simple. I can't just come back and pretend." "I'm not asking you to come back as my assistant," he interrupted. "I'm asking you to come back as my wife, publicly, officially, with an announcement in every business journal in Seoul if necessary. I want the whole world to know that I'm married to the most brilliant, beautiful, amazing woman in Korea. And if the board objects, if the shareholders revolt, if your mother never accepts me, then we'll face it together, all of it. I should have said this 2 years ago, Ji-woo. But I'm saying it now. You are more important to me than any company, any position, any reputation. You are my priority." Ji-woo was crying openly now, all the pain and loneliness of the past month pouring out of her. "I missed you so much," she whispered. "Come home," Do-hyun said softly. "Please come home to me." 2 days later, Ji-woo stood in the lobby of Kang Industries, wearing one of her nicest dresses, not a conservative work outfit, but something that made her feel beautiful and confident. She wasn't returning as Do-hyun's assistant, she was returning as his wife. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt surreal. When the doors opened, she saw that a small crowd had gathered, Min Jung from legal, several other colleagues, and even Park Sung-min, all looking curious and slightly confused. Do-hyun emerged from his office, and for the first time in public, he didn't maintain any professional distance. He walked straight to her, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her thoroughly in front of everyone. "Everyone," he said, turning, to address the gathered employees while keeping one arm firmly around Ji-woo's waist. "I'd like you to meet my wife, Lee Ji-woo. We've been married for 2 years, and I'm sorry we couldn't share our happiness with you sooner." The gasps and surprised murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Do-hyun wasn't finished. "Ji-woo will be joining our executive team as Director of Strategic Operations, a new position that will utilize her MBA and her extensive knowledge of our company's operations. I hope you'll give her the respect and cooperation she deserves." Park Sung-min stepped forward, his face red with embarrassment. "Mrs. Kang," he said formally, bowing deeper than he ever had when she was just an assistant. "Please accept my apologies for any misunderstandings in the past." Ji-woo smiled graciously, though there was steel in her voice when she replied. "Apology accepted, Mr. Park. I look forward to working with you in my new capacity." As the crowd began to disperse, buzzing with excitement over the revelation, Min Jung approached with a huge grin on her face. "I knew there was something special about you," she said, hugging Ji-woo warmly. "But I never guessed this. How did you manage to keep it secret for so long?" "Very carefully," Ji-woo replied with a laugh, "and at great personal cost." "Well, no more secrets now," Do-hyun said, pulling Ji-woo closer. "I'm done hiding the best thing in my life." 6 months later, Kang Industries held its annual shareholders meeting. Do-hyun stood at the podium, delivering his report on the Yo company's record-breaking year. In the front row sat his wife, no longer hidden in the shadows, but prominent and acknowledged, wearing a tailored suit that proclaimed her as the successful executive she had always been capable of becoming. The Tokyo merger had been the most successful in the company's history. The new Strategic Operations Department, under Ji-woo's leadership, had streamlined several key processes and increased efficiency across multiple divisions. Even the most skeptical board members had been forced to admit that the CEO's wife was a valuable asset to the company. "In closing," Do-hyun said, looking directly at Ji-woo as he spoke, "this year has taught me that the greatest successes come not from hiding our truth, but from having the courage to embrace it fully. Sometimes, the most important business decision you can make is to stop treating your personal life like a liability and start recognizing it as your greatest strength." The applause was thunderous, and as Do-hyun stepped down from the podium, Ji-woo met him halfway. They embraced in front of hundreds of shareholders, board members, and employees. No longer a secret, no longer hidden, but a partnership that had become stronger for having weathered the storm of secrecy and emerged into the light. "No regrets?" Do-hyun whispered in her ear as cameras flashed around them. "Only one," Ji-woo whispered back. "What's that?" "That we waited so long to stop being afraid." That evening, they returned to their penthouse apartment, no longer a hiding place, but simply home. As Ji-woo changed out of her executive attire, she caught sight of herself in the mirror and smiled. The woman looking back at her was confident, successful, and most importantly, completely herself. "Mrs. Kang," Do-hyun called from the bedroom, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "Your husband would like to take you to dinner, somewhere very public, very expensive, and very romantic." "Tell my husband," Ji-woo called back, "that his wife accepts his invitation." As they prepared for their evening out, their first truly public date as husband and wife, Ji-woo reflected on the journey that had brought them here, the secret marriage that had once seemed necessary, now seemed like a distant dream, a chapter in their story that had taught them both valuable lessons about courage, authenticity, and the true meaning of partnership. They had learned that love, hidden in shadows no matter how genuine, could never grow to its full potential. They had discovered that the things we try to protect by keeping them secret often grow stronger when exposed to light. Most importantly, they had realized that the greatest risk isn't in revealing your truth to the world. It's in losing yourself by hiding it. Walking out of their apartment building hand in hand, no longer assistant and boss, but equal partners in every sense, Do-hyun and Ji-woo stepped into their future with hearts full of hope and love that was finally free to shine as brightly as the Seoul skyline around them. Their secret was finally safe, not because it was hidden, but because it no longer needed to be.